if there was some sort of like big question as I wrote the book, one of the ones that kept coming up for me was, fuck, why did this take so long?
What do you mean? Like, why did this take so long?
Coming out, becoming my authentic self.
Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. How about you?
I'm not too bad. Congratulations on the book.
Thank you so much.
I loved reading it. I've already told you a little bit about why I love reading it, because it had some lovely nostalgic things for another, 36-year-old growing up on the East Coast of Canada.
Yeah.
But I was kind of curious about why I think there comes a time in everybody's life where they decide, okay, I'm going to tell my own story. Or everyone in a memoir's life, like I'm going to tell my own story. What was that moment for you?
Goodness, I think it was a couple things, I suppose. And, like writing a book had come up before in my life. And I couldn't wrap really my head around it. And I didn't really think it was possible, quite frankly. I mean, when it came up again, and then when I actually did have, space that was open to potentially embark on such a thing, I really felt so exhilarated because for the first time I could actually sit down with myself, was comfortable enough to do such a thing, had the space in my brain to actually create. And in many ways, it was as if I started writing and words just came, like I couldn't stop. And that sensation was so incredibly exhilarating. And in this climate, we've found ourselves with such extreme anti-trans rhetoric, lies and misinformation about our lives. It felt like an opportunity to grasp with having this platform that I have, in knowing how much stories have helped me, have changed my life, have offered me comfort and support. And I felt like by potentially sharing mine, if that could reach anyone and allow them to feel less alone or seen, that felt worth it to me, I suppose. And yeah, those two things like happened to collide, I'd say, at the same time.
You said you didn't think it was possible for a while. What do you mean by that?
Oh, I mean, I was just so uncomfortable in myself. The thought of even being able to sit down for hours and create was not feasible, like not a part of my reality at all. And since stepping into my truth, so to speak, and being in a body that feels like my own, feeling embodied in the way that I do, confidence in the way that I do, the sort of creative energy and force that has come with that, through that, has just been kind of, indescribable. Not something that I had imagined in my past. I did struggle to see a future. I did not know what my future would look like.
Really?
Uh-huh. And so that's what I mean by that.
I mean, what a beautiful feeling.
Yeah. Not something the way I feel now and the presence I feel now is not something that I believed to be possible in the past.
That's lovely.
Thanks.
At the beginning of the book, you're very clear. This is, trans narratives are not a monolith. My story is not the story of every trans person. Please don't read it that way. This is my own story.
Yeah.
Talk to me about why you wanted to start the book that way.
Well, I feel, obviously there's more representation than there's been in the past, of course, but there's still very little. And it's something I obviously am mindful of, and the complexities that come with visibility in regards to, no doubt it's important, it's crucial, it's meant so much to me, people being visible. seeing ourselves reflected, knowing we're not alone with these thoughts we're having, with this shame we're carrying that we shouldn't be, that's not our own. But also, backlash comes with visibility,
Yeah.
which disproportionately affects, of course, the most marginalized and vulnerable people in the community. And my life is not reflective of most trans people's experiences. People who disproportionately experience unemployment, experience homelessness, violence, incarceration, particularly Black trans people. And it's important that, my story is not some sort of universalized story for potentially some people who might not be as familiar with the trans community or have not read a lot of the books by trans and queer authors that I most certainly wish people would read.
Yeah, but people would the worry that people would read your story and go like, well, now I get it.
Exactly.
Now I understand the
Right.
trans experience.
Yeah.
You shortly in the book, not the very first part, because I know the very first chapter was sort of came out of you very naturally. I've heard you talk about that. You sort of writing and it just kind of streamed out of you the very first chapter about Paula. But then the second chapter, I was curious as to why it came so early in the book. And it's sort of about I think you would call it the sexuality sweepstakes. And it's around maybe the months before Juno comes out or right around the time Juno comes out. And there's a lot of speculation. And I might even add like pretty gross speculation, including here in Canada around you. Why did you want to go there so early in the book?
Well, I mean, the book obviously is nonlinear and inherently is nonlinear and structured that way to at least, for me to reflect how I feel in my experience as a trans and queer person. And I think a lot of people can relate to knowing who you are when you're really young, but not necessarily having the language for it. Then getting older, a lot of noise getting in the way, people filling you with ideas and narratives that mislead you from your truth, getting close, pulling back,
Yeah.
which is, reflected in this book. And for me, I wanted to start with a period that was in a time when I really, I felt like I was creeping closer to my truth, so to speak, or at least getting to a place where I was no longer going to allow shame to rule my life as much as it had growing up and in my adolescence.
Shame. Yeah.
And occupy, my mind and my body or my desires or what have you. And so, the first chapter sort of leading to that point, and then I felt like it was important to show that then that shift into being known and the first time when, most people learned who I was as an actor and what have you.
Yeah.
The impact of, the sort of speculation and headlines that you're speaking to and the pressure from the Hollywood machine, to deny and reject the person that I am. And so it felt sort of important to kind of launch off with that.
Kind of set up the stakes for what you were dealing with at the time.
Sure.
How did you feel writing about the shame?
Like just the experience of writing about
Yeah,
it.
especially in your early days, yeah.
Ooh.
It's a hard one. I find shame the hardest emotion to deal with in my own life.
Yeah.
I find guilt easier. I find anger easier. I find joy and all that stuff very pleasant.
Mm-hmm.
But when something boils down to shame for me, I find it very hard to access and even admit to myself. So I was curious about the act of having to write about feeling internalized shame when you were young. As much as you want to, by the way.
Yeah. I mean, I think in many ways there was something incredibly cathartic and healing writing about it, to be able to revisit those periods and write about it in an honest way. I think particularly, in that time after Juno came out, I felt guilty and about feeling any negative emotion. Like I just felt, oh, you're so ungrateful.
Yeah.
Like this is this thing so many people want, and being told your dreams are coming true all the time when, quite frankly, I was not feeling that way. That was
Yeah.
not a celebratory time for me whatsoever. And I was quite miserable, quite frankly. So writing about it was, interesting, because sometimes it could be difficult. Like I would have a physiological response, feel my body curling in, like,
Really?
oh yeah, get sweaty, like really. And I don't know too if it's because I'm never written a book before, and I don't know if it's because I'm an actor, so there's like a physical element to my work, and I don't know if I'm like feeling that and that's what allows words to happen, or vice versa, or what's going on there. But there was something incredibly healing to write very honestly and vulnerably and openly, particularly about a time where I was so closeted. And like private's not the word, that it's closeted, and to be able to sit and just write it all out without judging myself, at least not judging myself too much, it was, a new experience for me.
Yeah, I'm not surprised you had that sort of, I've heard that before about people having these sort of like physical, visceral reactions to kind of writing down these
Yeah.
childhood experiences or like young experiences.
Yeah.
There's something to be said for that time too, because I only knew you from movies and TV and stuff like that. And the characters, what struck me reading this book is the characters you were playing, help me out here, were very like outspoken. Like your roles in TV and film were almost known for being, if you were to be typecast as anything, it would be for like being this outspoken, sort of confident character. And of course, as a viewer, you can get that conflated with the person behind it's common, right? Did that irony ever descend on you, that you were making your living and getting fame and attention playing these really outspoken characters while inside sort of hiding your own self?
In my late teens, in some ways, I was confident and outspoken. I could take the producer of Juno to use clothing stores in Vancouver and being like, this is what she's going to wear, and felt able to communicate those things, at least from a creative standpoint. And then in so many ways, I feel like that got squashed. Literally, when that movie became the surprise hit, it became unprofitable. All of a sudden, they didn't seem to want the magic that I brought to that character that made that character special,
No.
Like, that was shoved away,
You had gotten this, help me understand this. You had
I'm
gotten
saying
this.
I think my queerness and my transness is a part of what made Juno cool,
Yeah.
what made that character special and resonate in a new way, particularly with a lot of young audience members, and then in terms of the actual promoting of the film and its success, that was apparently not allowed in that space.
I understand.
And I think entering, I'd been working since I was 10, but not obviously like in the midst of that very, very Hollywood world, which
Yeah.
was a shock to me and all very, very new for me.
Yeah, Pit Pony's not quite the same.
Pit Pony's not quite the same. And I think I got, veered off course in regards to my own personal trajectory and what I needed to where I needed to get to in my life. And, you know, obviously I made a choice to go along with it, but it definitely felt like it didn't feel like I had that much of a choice, though.
No.
Yeah. And I don't know why it took so long. That's a part of how I felt writing the book. If there was some sort of like big question as I wrote the book, one of the ones that kept coming up for me was, fuck, why did this take so long?
What do you mean? Like, why did this take so long?
Coming out, becoming my authentic self. Why did that have to take so long? I feel like I lost a lot of time.
Did you get any answers?
Yeah, a few. Yeah. I mean, in writing about the times where I dealt with the, you know, my external world, how I was being perceived, or the ways in which I was shamed or dismissed or told to not be myself, or that being myself was a bad thing.
Yeah.
If I was myself, I wasn't going to have success. If I, or in the moments in my life where I did try to come out on some level, or did try to make the first even tiny little steps to share who I was, whether in personal life with family or in the industry itself, some of the reactions and the feedback I got understandably just created this layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of shame and embarrassment that I swallowed, and it lived in my body, and it held me back.
Did you have to let yourself off the hook for those feelings?
As I was writing the book, you mean?
I guess so. I don't even know, Elliot, what I want to ask about that. There's something nagging in my head, but I want to be careful about it. Like, when you say to me, you know, Tom, the feeling I had was what took so long, and, you know, when you have shame built into you and all that stuff, I wondered, like, did you have to let yourself off the hook for why did it take so long?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have a lot of, you know, compassion for myself, of course.
Yeah.
I felt very alone in those periods, very isolated. I didn't really have like a queer community. I didn't, and I had I did have a lot to like dig through to get to where I needed to be, and a lot of pressure to not get there. And at the same time, I do, you know, reflect back and know that, you know, I very much played a role in that as well.
I love the way you write about the people who helped. I love the way you write about the people who were kind to you. I love the way you write about, is it Catherine Keener? Mm-hmm. The C. Keens. Do you still have the tattoo by then?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Right there?
Yeah.
Yeah, for people who don't know, like the actor, Catherine Keener. Well, you tell me. What am I going to do? Oh. I'll tell you. Elliot, let me tell you what she did.
Yeah.
No, please, like, talk to me a little bit about, I loved that chapter about how helpful she was during this time of your life, you know, that you just finished talking to me about, or you think you finished talking to me about, how she was able to help you.
Yeah, I don't know who I'd be or where I'd be without Keener. We met shooting a film called An American Crime, which is a very intense film based on a true story from the mid-'60s in Indiana. That I played a character named Sylvia Likens, who was brutally, brutally abused, mostly by this woman that Catherine played. And I was struggling in that period personally, and playing that character was not easy. And we really clicked kind of immediately. And I'd already looked up to her, I mean, so much. She was one of my favorite actors of all time. So the fact that I was just getting to work with her was sensational. And she just offered me so much love and support and care, and is a person who's always seen me for me and always only ever encouraged me to be honest in myself. And then later when I was in Los Angeles all the time during, the sort of pinnacle of Juno's success and leading up to the Oscars and all of that, she like took me from the hotel I was basically living in and let me live with her, and really, really took care of me through that time and has always been there for me ever since.
What were the feelings you had when you wrote about the people who helped you?
Deep, deep gratitude.
Yeah.
Because when I say I don't know where I'd be without these certain people in my life, I really don't.
A couple of things that some people do privately and to their friends and family, like coming out to friends and family, you did or had to do very publicly. And actually, just before I walked over here, I watched the video of you in Vegas coming out as gay. I love the way you write about that in the book. What do you remember from that day?
I remember being so nervous.
Yeah.
Like, next level nervous. Rereading and rereading and rereading and rereading the speech over and over again to try and make it like not doing everything I could to make it like emotionless on some level, because at first like I couldn't get through it. I couldn't get through a paragraph.
You'd start crying.
Carried so much emotion with that. Yeah. And had been so closeted for so long. I came out when I was just, a week before my 27th birthday. And I remember getting to the hotel room in Vegas, like waiting before the moment, and just laying in bed, just like holding my body, staring at nothing at all. Just praying I wouldn't have a panic attack on stage. Just like, please get through this. So a mixture of extreme nerves and the thrill of finally being in a place to do that and to make that step, which wasn't where I ultimately needed to get to.
Yeah.
But was a giant leap towards it.
It's not right away either. I watched the speech before I came here. Like I thought when I watched, because I read about it in the book and I figured I must watch it. And when I watched I thought, well, he's going to do it right off the top. But it's like 6 minutes in. So I can only imagine the trepidation and the nervousness you were feeling up until that moment.
Yeah.
And then I see this big kind of happen afterwards.
Yeah.
How was it afterwards? How was the rest of the day? How was the
rest of the day was, well, like that. There was essentially a giant full body exhale, and as if a bag of bricks I'd let go of. Really, truly in an instant. The rest of the day was, I think right after, very briefly went to like a queer bar. But then I had to fly. I had to quickly get to Montreal for reshoots for X-Men. But then even on that set, people were just like, you seem so different.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I am. I am. Sure, there's been sort of multiple coming outs in my life, and I think we always focus on like before and after, particularly with trans narratives. But to me, it's such a sort of like the structure of the book, such a non-linear experience in so many ways. And that was undoubtedly just, I wouldn't have gotten to where I needed to be without that moment and the space and the freedom that allowed in my life. And first major step in having excavated a lot of shame that I'd been carrying.
I'm so happy you said that. When you went back to X-Men, people were looking at you and going like, you seem different. And you were like, well, yeah, I am. I feel, because can I be honest with you? The writing in the book feels different after you come out as trans. Like the parts in the book, you know what I mean? Like the parts of the book after you've written about that part of your life, that moment, are so, they feel looser. It feels like there's a tension, even lost in the writing when I read those parts of the book. When did you start to realize what it might mean for you to come out as trans? Do you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. I mean, that's a good question, because I even think back to, well, I mean, I think back to, and I write about this in the book, around my 30th birthday, like right before I turned 30 or right after. And that was the first time I very much, to myself and out loud to very few people, but some, was starting to say, like, I'm trans. I think I'm trans.
Yeah. I
allowed that to exist for a moment, and then I really, really did. I shoved that away, and I don't think a big part of that reason was, well, clearly I wasn't ready, I guess, but also the sense of, how is this possible? Like, just as a known actor, what does that look like? What does it mean to transition publicly? Like, it just felt so big, as it always had before, when I did have a sense of who I was, very much so. And I would kind of constantly talk myself out of it, you know? Oh, no, you just need to learn to be more comfortable. You just need to get tighter sports bras. You just need to dress this way. You just need to get this haircut. You da-da-da-da-da-da. And trying all these things. Because I was struggling to wrap my head around how would that look like? What would that mean? And then, of course, you know, it wasn't for a few more years till I actually made the steps I needed to make to be myself and live my life.
3.5 million Instagram likes on that post, I think.
Oh, the statement I wrote? You
Yeah.
mean? Yeah.
Again, back to the curiosity is not on the scale, but on the publicness, if that's a word, of what is now, because it's on the CBC, the publicness of it, the thing that some people have to do privately, or some people have to do, you know, to friends and family or for coworkers and stuff like that. Like, such a public thing to do. What happens after that Instagram, after that post goes up? What does your phone look like? What does...
I think I might have put the phone down. My friend Mark, actually, who I write about in the book, who's in the first and the last chapter, and who is from Toronto, and came in and took care of me after my surgery. He lives 3 hours outside of the city, but he actually came back in for that day, which was very sweet of him.
It's very nice.
Because it was intense, you know, isolation period during the pandemic, and as I recall, it was very much a time of, setting the phone aside and us just going for a walk with the dog, and, you know, but, you know, I felt enormous support from people, of course. A lot of people close to me, of course, already knew, and if they didn't know, weren't remotely surprised. And anyone who was, you know, just sent love to me. And I made a point of not looking at a lot of things, because I didn't want to invite in anything that was going to be like hateful or harmful, you know.
You didn't want to look too hard for anything that might make you feel a certain way, or make you more of that shame, or more of that.
Yeah, don't need that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about this in the office, and I was talking about this with a friend of mine last night, that, like, there's a world in which coming out as trans in like 2010 might be easier than coming out as trans in 2023. You know, you have, as you mentioned earlier, like tremendous anti-trans rhetoric in the world right now. I mean, not just rhetoric, legislation, violence, hatred, mainstreamized hatred. How much has that been on your mind, specifically as you've been doing this press tour?
It's on my mind a lot, you know. I think it's on a lot of people's minds. Unfortunately, of course. You know, I think to me it's I suppose it, if anything, I do my best to turn it into motivation to continue to be myself and share my story without holding back or not like allowing myself to feel affected by the hate that comes towards me. You know, I know who I am, and I'm going to express the joy I feel. And I want to be mindful in the sense that it makes me use my privilege and my platform to do what I can in whatever way I can to help create change, and hopefully offer, you know, I guess what I can, you know.
What's bringing you joy these days?
All kinds of stuff. I mean, when you go from being absurdly uncomfortable all the time, to the degree that you can like barely fucking think or function. Excuse me. Should I not say the F word?
Listen, at this point, Elliot, you're such a Canadian icon that I think you can say fucking the CBC. I think you're allowed.
Thanks, CBC.
Yeah, no problem. One time only.
Yeah.
Joni Mitchell's allowed to smoke and you're allowed to say fuck. That's
okay,
what
cool.
it is, yeah.
Wow, that's an honor.
Congratulations.
You know, to go from being barely able to think or function to not really understand how people go about their lives, like to waking up and feeling present and feeling embodied. I mean, that's joy to me. It's having coffee in the silence with my dog in the morning, truly. So it's, of course, the big, obvious moments. And for me, it's also very much the moments in stillness. And so much for me right now when we do think about all the horrificness in regards to laws being passed and hate towards us being, you know, weaponized and used to gain votes and power. Really, I feel so much joy when I'm hanging out with my trans friends and we're just together and sharing space and laughing and doing karaoke. And, you know, like when I was up here shooting the 4th season, like, you know, friends visited and go to Canada's Wonderland and go on roller coasters and, you know, walk to High Park and wander around for hours. And community. To me, that's key right now for joy is community.
There's a laser pointer about to be at my head in a second. I just want to tell you how, first of all, how grateful I am to get a chance to talk to you about this and just how much love I felt and we all felt for you when we were reading this book. And thanks so much for taking the time and talking to us today. Nice to have you.
Oh, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.